When you were a kid, did you ever play that game where you just have that balloon and you've got to keep tapping it up to yourself? Just over and over again, just whatever you do, don't let it drop. Of course you played that game. Every kid played that game. And it can kind of feel like our faith is a little bit like this balloon, right? Where it's not hard, especially at first. At first, it's really actually kind of easy. You know, just the games keeps our attention pretty well. It's entertaining. It's not complicated at all. But in time, all of a sudden, so much of our energy just goes into just not letting it drop. And we get a little bored and tired and even distracted. It's not that we fail or that we want to let it drop. It's just that, it's not really holding our attention the same way that it used to. Maybe you're feeling that way. Bored or distracted. Just wondering, why won't the balloon just stay up? Why does it keep coming back down? And you're thinking to yourself, is this really all that Jesus has for me? I mean, it can't be, right? Like, certainly there's got to be more to our walk with God than this. So Jesus is walking around doing what Jesus does, and crowds of people are swarming him. I mean, they look at him as this amazing teacher. Some people are looking at him as this incredible healer. Others see him as an antagonist to the people that they don't like either. And everybody sees him as a revolutionary. Jesus is like a movement. And there is an energy and an excitement around him. His popularity is at an all-time high. And so what does Jesus do with that? He thins out the crowd, because this crowd that's following him, they aren't they're sampling Jesus. They're watching Jesus, but they're not following Jesus. And so he turns to that crowd and he says, if you really want in, if you want to be my disciple, you have to hate your mother and your father. I mean, this is not the Jesus we're accustomed to. This isn't the God who knit us in our mother's womb, or loves us so deeply, or has great purposes and plans for us. This is the God who says, hate your mother. The same Jesus who says, love your enemy, says, hate your mother. I mean, this is hard. And then he goes on to say, if you do that, be prepared, because if you do still follow me, you're going to be killed for it. He finishes off by saying, take up your cross and follow me. I mean, this is the end of a movement. You can feel Jesus letting the air out of the balloon. The other day, a friend of mine called me a runner, and it felt so weird because I don't think of myself as a runner. I think of myself as a person who runs from time to time, but not a runner. That's like an identity. I have a friend, and she's a runner. I think about how far she's gone this year, but not only that, even when she's not actually running, she's still a runner. She eats certain foods because it's like fuel for her. I eat certain foods because they taste good, and I'm not giving up my Chick-fil-A. I mean, she buys shoes that are expensive because it's particularly chosen for how she lands and steps. And I mean, I have these. Can you see these things? I mean, there's like a flap here and a hole, and I like this hole because that's where the wind gets in and cools off my foot. It's not the same. I mean, for her, she makes sacrifices for her running. And I don't make the same sacrifices. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to make those sacrifices for one big reason. I'm not a runner. See, it's easy to go on a run. It's a lot harder to be a runner. It's easy to watch Jesus, to admire Jesus from the margins, but it takes a whole lot more to be his disciple. So Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that sounds really nice, but it sure doesn't feel like it sometimes, right? Like sometimes it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels exhausting. Even our walk with God can feel exhausting. But we do all the things anyway. We do all the right things. We serve, and we don't do it for ourselves. We serve because we know somebody's got to do it. Or we give financially. And we don't do that for ourselves. We do that because we know the church and the mission and the ministry is counting on that. We even go to church, sometimes not for ourselves, but we go for our kids or our families or because of expectation from the culture and friendship circles around us. So much of our walk with God has nothing to do with us. And so when the Apostle Paul says, all of these things, don't do them for your own sake. We think to ourselves, I'm not doing anything for my own sake. And I'm getting really burned out. It's getting really, really difficult to keep this balloon up over and over and over again. And I know that it's not supposed to be this way. There's this guy named Larry, and Larry has a last name, but literally nobody knows it. He just goes by Lawn Chair Larry. And he earned this nickname because back in like 1982, he had this brilliant idea to tie 45, 46 helium air balloons to a lawn chair, to sit on it and cut himself loose. He thought he'd float up to a nice cruising 20, 30 feet in the air and have a good view of his neighborhood. But instead, he shot up immediately to 16,000 feet. I mean, terrifying, right? Like he shoots up into the sky and is up there with like planes and stuff. And you think about Larry and you think about us and what's the difference? What's the difference between Lawn Chair Larry and this? I mean, it's pretty simple, right? It's what's in the balloon. It's what is holding it up. And for Lawn Chair Larry, 45 helium balloons shot him straight up into the sky where he's holding on for dear life. But us, we fill these things up on our power, with our breath, and all that's in our balloons is just us. Is it any surprise they come falling back down over and over and over again? Following Jesus is hard. Giving our lives to something that is bigger than us is hard. But it's not supposed to be hard because we're putting all of our energy into whatever we can manage to create. It's supposed to be hard because we are hanging on for dear life as Jesus does more in us and through us than we could ever possibly imagine.